Welcome back. We're halfway through the 83rd Texas legislative session, and today we're taking a look at the big issues that have been coming up all session. Here is our roundtable. Brian Sweeney from Texas Monthly, Corey McLagan from Reuters, and Mike Ward from the Austin American-Statesman. Welcome, everyone. Well, I want to dive right into the budget because we had the full Senate that passed the budget out of the Senate, and now the House Appropriations Committee has passed the budget out of committee, and it will be on the House early April. So what are the big differences we're seeing? I keep hearing about education. What do you think?
Well, one of the things that is in many ways how similar it is. There's only $600 million off in general revenue between the two bills. Both are putting money back into public ed. The difference on that side between the House and the Senate is the House has put in about $1 billion more, about $2.5 billion. But here we look like restoration is sort of the key to what's happening with these budgets.
And we keep hearing maybe more money could be coming through some supplemental, and I know Chairman Pitt said that this thing is not over just yet, but do you feel like that's the House side? Is the Senate going to be able to come to a compromise on that?
Well, Senator Williams has said that the budget is a work in progress as well, and that there's a lot of other things that might be added or tweaked. And the budget as it is right now doesn't include several things. It doesn't include the tax relief that Governor Perry has called for. It doesn't include what might be drawn from the rainy day fund, perhaps for water or transportation projects. So he said it's still a work in progress at this point.
When she talks about the rainy day fund, I mean, that's been one of the issues that people have been saying. Why aren't we taking more out of the rainy day fund so we could put more of this general revenue into education?
And obviously you've got the proposal now to do constitutional question for the voters on establishing some additional funds there that you would pull money out of the rainy day fund that would then be repaid kind of like a loan. And probably, even though this is a restoration session for education funding and some other things, the water projects and the infrastructure projects will be funded over the next few years by decisions made in this session, maybe some of the most significant things that people out on the street will see with new highways and water projects and this type of thing.
And wildfire funding has been something they've also been talking about, and it seems like they want to pay for that sooner and not take money out of the rainy day fund. Am I correct?
I think that's right. That's where you're seeing some of the pushback from the Republicans. Sylvester Turner in the House has made this case. Certainly Wendy Davis made this case in the Senate related to SB 1 of using some of the rainy day fund, which has not been drawn down yet, to help cover some of these expenses and free up GR so that they have room underneath the constitutional spending cap. I suspect that that's where you're going to see some of the arguments going forward. That's exactly right with the water fund bill. HB 11 is to take $2 billion from the rainy day fund specifically to fund those types of projects. And it'll be interesting to see how much money comes back in, and I think you'll still have the argument, is it enough or is it not enough?
Mm-hmm. And on the wildfires, I mean, you had the biggest, most destructive wildfire in Texas history happening in Bastrop and destroyed so much out there, and I think people are really responding to that.
Right. And that's another thing, because that money needs to get taken care of right now because there's deadlines with FEMA, correct?
That's right.
Well, let's move on now to some more criminal justice topics. I know that we had the big DNA test for if you're going to be trying someone on a death penalty case. So basically this would make it where you would have to test for DNA any biological evidence if you are going to be going that route. Do you think that this is something that the rest of the Senate's going to be able to get behind?
Yeah, so you're talking about the proposal by Senator Rodney Ellis from Houston, which also has the backing of General Abbott, Attorney General Greg Abbott, which would require in cases where the state is seeking the death penalty that all biological evidence would have to be DNA tested before trial. So the point is right now, well, first of all, they don't want innocent people to be executed. But there's also a problem, General Abbott was saying, with years and years and years of appeals, and he said sort of drawing out the process after the fact. He wants to see, why don't we just DNA test everything up front?
And this is especially timely because the Norwood case, which is related to the Michael Morton case, is happening right now in San Angelo.
Well, right, and that's what's driving a lot of the DNA testing and changes, tweaks in the system so that you don't end up with more Michael Morton cases. But beyond that, there's also a lot of mental health funding that's being built into the budget this year to pull people, to treat people's issues before they get into the criminal justice system, and even once they're in the criminal justice system, to treat their issues there so they don't just, it's not a revolving door. And between the DNA stuff and the bills that are going through on that and the mental health stuff, I think there's a potential to see a major shift in the criminal justice system over the next 5 years as far as costs and what's been a revolving door in the past.
And when we're talking about mental health funding, I think a lot of that conversation has been brought up because of the school shootings that have been happening in the nation, correct?
Exactly.
Right.
Senator Williams, the head of the Senate Finance Committee, specifically said that it was because of those school shootings that people have been talking about the need for more mental health funding in Texas.
It's also been a way, I think, for some leaders to get behind the notion of gun control without getting behind the notion of gun control, that we begin to address a root issue, which is cuts to mental health funding, instead of turning in another direction. And so you're seeing issues related to school safety. I think that's going to go through in these bills, but also increased mental health funding that we're seeing in both Senate and House budgets.
And here in Austin, another criminal matter that we've been talking about a lot lately is with the former Capitol staffer Gabrielle Nestandi and the whole hit and run case there. You know, Kirk Watson has been very diligent in trying to get tougher penalties for hit and run cases. And how is that working right now? I know it had a little bit of success in the Senate. What's going to happen now?
I think it's going through pretty fast, frankly. It passed quickly through the Senate Criminal Justice Committee, and it's going to go through just as fast on the Senate floor, and I anticipate it will go through in the House. It's not just the Austin hit and run case or a hit and run case in Dallas. It's a disparity, a loophole in the law now, that if you hit somebody and they die and you leave the scene, you can face less serious consequences than if you hit someone and you stay at the scene. And that's what that law would correct. It's a loophole plug.
And you know what's so interesting about so many of these pieces of legislation, big pieces of legislation that we're talking about, is that they're all things that I think lawmakers are hearing from their constituents, things that have been in the news, pressures that people have been feeling, either related to public ed or to some of these other things. Certainly with the Nestandi case, that's another example where I feel like the legislature is beginning to take some of these issues on, as opposed to a session that is simply cut, 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 no, no, no.
We have been talking about the most valuable players of the session this morning, and you know, we had looked at maybe Wendy Davis, Kirk Watson, Dan Patrick, Alan Ritter. Are there any other names that are coming to mind that you feel like have really been all-stars in getting legislation pushed through this session?
Those are some of the major voices, obviously. There's other people that are kind of emerging, and I think in the next few weeks, you're going to see a number of other people, even some of the freshmen, that are going to come to the fore with a very clear voice on various issues that's going to resonate with people around Texas.
Corey?
You had Sylvia Garcia, the brand new senator, was one of just 2 no votes on the budget in the Senate, so everyone was sort of paying attention to that. Who is she, and what was that vote about?
Just a few weeks in.
Wendy Davis, exactly right. And I would say on my side, on the House, you know, in the previous session, it's like some of those legislators came through on their horses, firing guns in the air, and bullets were spraying everywhere, and things were being cut. I think there's a level of control now in the House through Speaker Joe Straus that there had not previously been. We're seeing bills like HB 4 and HB 5 coming out of committee with unanimous votes, and they're being lined up, I think, to move through the House with fairly minimal pushback. I think what we've seen there is that Straus is taking control. I think his lieutenants are doing the job that he's asked them to do, and we're seeing progress there. I think that set the stage for everything else.
And I think in the Senate, you've seen a lot less contentiousness than a lot of people expected, with a new freshman class that included a lot of very conservative folks that were expected to not play well with some of the more moderates and some of the Democrats. And so I think that is one change, generally speaking, both House and Senate, that people are so far getting along better than expected, maybe.
And we're only halfway through.
Right.
All right, thank you guys for joining us. And coming up on In Session In Depth.
So this is not in any way an anti-Mexico resolution. This is a please work with us resolution.
Every drop counts in this drought, so is Texas entering a water war? We look at the long-standing international fight for this precious resource ahead on In Session In Depth.
We're from Oregon, and we have brought